Welcome to this week's episode of Safe Room, your weekly source for horror gaming discussions and proudly part of Bloody Disgusting's Bloody FM podcast network. I'm your host, Jay Krieger.
And I'm the other one, Neil Bolt.
And this week we've got an all-new grab bag of games that we've been playing over the course of the last week to chat about. But before that, a bit of housekeeping, as we have a new edition of Horror Bites, our bi-weekly indie horror showcase that debuts on every other Thursday. This week, though, we will have a brand new episode debuting the theme of space, aka sci-fi horror games. So be sure to check that out as Neil and I both bring a pick of a sci-fi horror game that tackles the genre in two very distinctly different ways from one another. But we got that housekeeping out of the way. Neil, how are you doing this week?
Yeah, not too bad. Unfortunately, not an abundance of things played this week, so or even watched are relevant. So yeah, the glut has faded slightly for this week. Still got something.
And to be fair, the two that you've picked to chat about this week are things that I have played. So maybe those will be ways to prolong the chats about those. Than if that was the opposite case of that. So for you, what have you been playing this week? What do you want to start with?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with I went back to Half Mermaid's Immortality because Lost in Cult, as you may know, did basically their Criterion collection for video games called Editions a couple of years ago now. I think it was they started doing pre-orders, and I'd pre-ordered that back then for the first three things, and didn't know what state they were in until they sort of showed up a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, I mean, it was gorgeous to see this box thing, and it in an age of video games being very limited in boxes, to get something that had this great booklet with essays from, I think it's Jen Simpkins, I think is who does it, and fantastic essays in that, and the postcards of the images from the game. And just the whole packaging it as well. It was nice to see the work. It was done so well on it. I couldn't believe that we got something so bespoke, for a video game. And it's a game that just feels like it deserves it. And I didn't want to open my copy, of the actual game, the physical copy. So I ended up I had it already on PS5 as a download anyway. So I started playing it on there because I'd initially played it on Xbox, I think, when we first talked about it all those years ago. And yeah, it's just, I think with a lot of games and films that I've played and seen since we've originally covered it, I think I've got greater appreciation for it, especially in terms of the influences that Sam Barlow had for this game. And kind of going into it again, sort of understanding what happened in terms of the story behind what's going on in this game. It does sort of add an extra sort of layer to it. But I just loved how tactile the whole sort of the film thing of just rewinding and fast forwarding and finding these hidden things within the image, and the whole concept still fascinates me because I'm a big sort of found footage fan, in terms of the film genre. So to have a whole game based around we found these 3 movies about this movie star that's disappeared, and it's almost like you're doing a detective drama in the same way that Barlow's previous stuff, like Her Story and Telling Lies, did similar things where you were sort of scrubbing through footage, so to speak. But here it feels those were more internet focused, and obviously with this game it's going back to something. You are using more modern technology effectively to go back into these old films. I mean, it's a game that just staggers me on so many levels. I think the horror of it and the otherworldly stuff that especially if you watched any sort of level of David Lynch stuff, is really well done and kind of capturing that spirit. But yeah, it's every layer that comes into thinking, how did you do that? And I had to go back and see that documentary on the making of the game, because it occurred to me I never actually went around to watch that. like after it came out, it was a no clip one.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's like I don't mind the whole how the sausage is made sort of thing. I'm old enough not to be like, oh, the magic of the movies, I can't let it be spoiled sort of thing. I'm very much fascinated about how different things come into the making of the things. So yeah, that really just added extra layers to it. So it was a really nice way to sort of revisit the game. Like I spent like a good part of the week just going through it again, and obviously coming into it this time knowing how the game plays and what you're supposed to do from the outset. Like, sure, a little bit of that like initial mystery is gone, but I don't know, you feel like more like you're playing a role in that story, like, as you are supposed to be. That
Right.
you are supposed to be like, this is your job. You're supposed to be going through this stuff. You should know how it works, sort of thing. Which is a slight, conceptually is something you could say about the game on your first playthrough. It doesn't kind of ring true. But yeah, on a replay, like that. I mean, yes, no element of surprise, but yeah, it's just there's so much to it. I just love, and the whole thing with Manon Gage and what she does in that role as Marissa Marcel, and all that stuff underneath that just again, I don't want to spoil anything because it is a game that really does to this day just deserve to be explored and like unveil that mystery for yourself. And
Mm.
yeah, I mean, it cemented it as being one of my favorite games, I think, of this decade, in terms of what it presents to us. I did worry that coming back to it, that there would be some magic lost. But I think
Mhm.
because it's such a uniquely made thing, it just doesn't. There's not. I don't think I've played anything remotely like it since. So it's not. I can't say, oh yeah, well these games have come along now, so I can't. Oh, this game's not going to do anything for me in the same way now because it's not new and original, and I know what happens. And it's craft, and Bar's sort of like obsession with how filmmaking and things like that work, and just it's just so wonderfully put together.
Yeah, if anything, this is one of those things that has been released that just like makes me wish, and hopefully will influence me in the future to really jump on these kinds of like limited edition runs for games the same way that as we talk a lot about it prior to recording, like our inability to say no to a lot of like
Mm.
releases of films and things like that, and special edition 4K re-releases with all the extra goodies and accoutrements you'd expect. And so for something like this, though, for Immortality, like, yeah, this would have been a no-brainer if I had been more cognizant of it when the pre-order season was around. Like, just the notion that you could have those linear scripts for each one of those films and whatnot, on top of some of the other things that are in this, like the ticket stubs for the movies and movie posters, like official posters of um, the movies that are in the game and whatnot. Like, it just kind of like, I think it's the type of game that lends itself to these types of things. But again,
Yeah.
because of, and it's something that we highlighted when we covered the game, like Sam Barlow being the creative helm of this, like all of these aspects of it that went into the game itself, like these are things that, they are going to have the level of care and, sort of execution that you would want if you were going to actually be making like a movie, right? And so the fact that he would kind of like back up each one of these unique stories with all these, again, little like behind the scene tidbits, and at the same time just like presenting it with the care that you would hope would be going into a movie. And except here, again, like the physical aspect of the game and like digging into the different film reels and things like that kind of just like further speaks to how that is such a special game. And you mentioning it's from 2022 is just like maddening. Again, it's an assault to my perception of time, but it is the type of game at the same time that I really was wondering, like, how would this game be to return to? Because I haven't replayed it since we covered it. But to hear that, like, naturally, if you're going to go back and replay it, you don't spend the first 2 hours or so just like remembering, like, oh, we're learning how you influence the manipulation of like those videos and things like that. I would be really interested to see for me, like, how that plays out in terms of just like essentially fast forwarding on the
Mm.
sort of like learning aspect and diving right into the investigatory piece, which I think would be pretty interesting in terms of like how it would flavor my response to the game. So I think this is one I've been meaning to go back and replay, and no promises, but we'll see if I'm able to get back to it and just kind of like see how this lands a second time, because it's an overwhelming experience the first time you play it. And I think that's pretty central to the overall experience. But at the same time, like I would really be interested to analyze the craftsmanship here free of that, diving into the world in a way that I remember and know how to interact with it, and seeing if a lack of deciphering the controls and things like that, or just like the player's own sort of like ingenuity would spoil anything. But at the same time, I don't think that's going to be the case based upon what you've said. So I'm very jealous in terms of you having this. And on top of that, like going through Lost in the Cult's other sort of like special edition versions of games, like not having a poster for Excavation of Hobbs Barrow still weighs heavily on me, but maybe they do a reprint at some point. I'll try to jump on that.
Yeah, my only regret of like getting like the initial like free game run was like of the editions was that I didn't realize that it would be platform specific. So, and of course, Excavation is not on PS5, so like that ended up not being like the third game in my collection. I think it was, I can't remember what it was. That's still not come, but I mean, the first two were Immortality and Thank Goodness You're Here, which I think is great anyway as a game. But I mean, that was a weird thing as well. Like these are games I own like digitally, like in more than one case. Like Immortality, I own it like 3 times, I think now. Like so.
Oh, man.
Yeah, like, and just because I like having it, sort of thing. And same with Thank Goodness You're Here. I played that, I finished it very quickly because it's like 2 hours or something. But like in both cases, like yeah, it felt great to have the option to like have a proper like collector's edition thing, yeah, where there's all these great bits and pieces like that. I mean, in gaming terms, there's very few games I'd want to do that for that would fit that mold. And yeah, when I think it was because of Immortality that when that first came up, I was like, perfect game to start this off, you know, like in terms of like bridging the gap, if you will, between like what people in film would do, you know, in getting collector's editions and people in video game worlds, and taking it away from that sort of gimmicky tat sort of thing, you know, like, and making it more of a treating it seriously, which like it's hard, I think, for the audience because there's a lot of treatment of games as being like toys first and foremost, and rather than being like forms of art in any way. So yeah, it's great. You know, like I'm very scared to like touch it, like in any shape or form. Like ever since I got them, the little quaint boxes they came in on top of the actual boxes, so I've kind of kept them in them for the most part. So.
Well, as we've been talking, I've been going through the wares of Lost in Cult, and I see they have design workbooks for things like Faith, the Unholy Trilogy, and mouthwashing. So I reckon I'm about to spend some money.
Yeah, that Faith one.
As we're chatting here.
Yeah, that Faith one came up recently, was it? And I was like, yeah, that's great. I'm glad because that's something I'd love to read all about that and see where you get that story from. I don't think it was them that did it, but someone else did something I snapped up very early on, like collector's edition wise, which was the artwork book for Still Wakes the Deep. Like again, that's beautiful stuff. Like I mean, the front cover of that book just like it pleases me because it's like that was a very rain swept sort of version of like the rig, like and, like sort of embossed like the rain effects like across the page and on the front cover. It's all just beautiful, and yeah, it's cool seeing like all the concept stuff. And yeah, I do like getting this sort of stuff for games, but yeah, definitely there's only certain games I'll do it for, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that otherwise you end up with the issue that I'm sure lots of people have, where you just end up with 101 special editions of something, and then naturally your spouse or significant other will chew you out for the amount of nerd shit you got scattered around the apartment or the house. So
as I sit staring at an endless supply of Blu-rays in
Yeah.
front of me. So, as it is. So yeah, I'm not shy on finding that. I mean, I think I spent like 90 quid on just that Dawn of the Dead, like
Hmm.
4K remaster when that first came out. 'Cause like, well, they'd not had it out on anything before, like other than like this DVD that's dying, and like, yep, I'm just gonna get that. And that was the last time I had like a proper no-brainer. I don't care that it costs this money, sort of
Hmm.
thing. Like, I'll have this. So,
No. Well, you got to make those exceptions for some things in your collection and whatnot. And this will certainly be
yeah,
one I wish I had made that exception
yeah.
for.
Having said that, Andy Kelly's Alien Isolation Perfect Organism book, that was another one where it was like the
Mhm.
second I saw it, I was like, yeah, the making of book of that was, which I think Lost and Colt are now like reissuing because he had problems with the publisher for that one. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean. If you hadn't seen that before, and the new one version of it looks great in terms of what they're doing with illustrations and stuff.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I think that's the one that gave me like the confidence to sort of like get into more of this stuff in like games again. Because even though it was like a, an unofficial sort of thing, it was like the effort and work that Andy put into it, knowing how much he loved Alien Isolation. It was like again total no brainer to sort of get a book from someone who's that into it, and yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm adding things as we speak to my Lost in Cult order, so I think that's going to be at the top of the list there. So I love that cover too. If anybody
Yeah,
wants to check that out, it's just that's a gorgeous looking repackaging of a book that you've spoken highly of in the past to me. So definitely give me a reason to check that out.
yeah. So yeah, I don't just buy novelizations of my favorite games. So plenty of those too. But yeah, now we've talked about spending money. What else? What have you played this week?
Well, I kicked off the week with the latest mode for a game that 2026 game that we were both very keen on, that being
Hmm.
Resident Evil Requiem. And the new mode, which kind of was shadow dropped, is Leon Must Die Forever, which is the first piece of DLC for that game. Now, naturally, a lot of people were probably expecting Capcom to follow the traditional trajectory of continuing content for their games, that being like Mercenaries mode. But no, they went a step further and gave us something that kind of shakes up that formula while at the same time not being too dissimilar from it. So for Leon Must Die mini game mode, you're essentially running through several levels of that game. However, what it is that it has a roguelite kind of score attack system on top of it.
Hmm.
So, not unlike Mercenaries, you have this time limit. And the time limit can get extended if you're in the environment, and you basically will see these like golden spiders that if you shoot them, they add 70 seconds of playtime. And then, you're going to run through an environment and deal with more or less the same threats that were there in the single player, albeit a couple of modifiers. There's a couple of different zombies you'll encounter that have like a different color palette to them, and they're
Hmm.
like neon blue, neon red. And these are zombies that are either have a heightened resistance to like melee attacks, or they are more susceptible to parries, and then you can deal additional damage to them if you parry one of their attacks. And so you begin with basically just a handgun, and then you run through this environment, and they have basically chests that you can come across to pick up new weapons. If you kill some of these enhanced zombies, they have the chance of dropping weapons that are present in the single player, but they basically have like modifiers on them. And additionally, much like from the Claire side of the campaign, um, or was it Grace, not Claire? From the Grace side of things in the campaign, like every time you kill a zombie, you don't have to pick up their blood, but you have basically a score or a little meter that fills up, and you can spend every time you get to like 100 of whatever that consumption is, you can buy modifiers or like perks basically. And I think you can have like 7 or 8 different perks that give you abilities boosting certain damage output for weapons. Sometimes it'll be something that makes you, if you use like a stim pack, all of a sudden you'll be impervious to any damage for like 3 seconds afterwards, or
Yeah.
something that will, increase your hatchet melee combat output, but it will come at the cost of decreasing your firearm damage output. So there's these like various modifiers to it, and then you basically just run through these levels, and sometimes there's like there's multiple doors, and they'll take you to different environments or different stages that have different leveled basically zombies, which just make them more resistant to damage and they hit harder and whatnot. So for me, I really enjoyed this. I think that it kind of scratches somewhat of a similar itch to Mercenaries for me. However, I really do like that perk sort of modifier system to it. Because that after a couple of playthroughs of this, you get a good handle on that. You start to string together some perks that you think will give you, your desired play style. And then you can kind of just like run through the challenge of sometimes, you'll start out at level 1 and then maybe I'll go through the level 9 door based upon how I make a certain build for Leon. And I think it gives a good enough variation. I'm a huge sucker for a lot of these like roguelite approaches to games and whatnot. So for me, like this scratched an itch that I wouldn't get and I don't get through like New Game Plus. I know that that's always been a staple. Lots of people love that approach, but for me personally, I've never really been into that. And so this mode basically facilitates that in a way that gives it a little bit more challenge, but at the same time, the sort of like random nature of what am I going to unlock or what am I going to discover earlier on than I normally would have in terms of like weapons and things like that. So for me, I had a lot of fun with Leon Must Die Forever. And basically you get to earn some of the credits that you earn throughout the course of like the campaign, which you can buy bonuses. So you can buy different unlocks in terms of perks, items, weapons. And then additionally, like if you beat the end boss, then you unlock basically like an outfit for Leon that's more than cosmetic. It also changes the starting weapons and the starting perk. So I finished, I killed Victor, who's the end boss.
Gideon,
Or Gideon, yeah. I killed him this morning for the very first time, but that basically unlocks like a wolf outfit for Leon, which I was a little worried that was just going to be like appeasing whatever the furry fan base of Resident Evil is. But more importantly, like it changes your starting loadout and it gives you a perk that you can't unequip, which is that every time you kill an enemy, you've got like a 10% chance of adding a multiplier or adding more time to the clock. And so there's a couple other costume unlocks that have a subsequent perk to go along with them, which I haven't gotten to yet, but it's been sort of just a fun way to revisit a game that I love very much, but I'm not necessarily ready to dive back into a full replay of.
Yeah.
But yeah, have you been able to give any time to Leon Must Die? Or
No, you know what? I sort of barely skirted over it, seeing that it was a new mode. I did not. I kind of expected it to be like Ethan Must Die, like in terms of like mode, especially when they were like really driving home this idea that it was like a mini game and nothing, a little something. But yeah, hearing that it's like a thing like this is like that's far more intriguing. Like that's much better. But I mean, Capcom probably just being slightly behind the curve again from like other developers, because obviously this happened with stuff like God of War, I think Ragnarok, where they had like that added on mode, obviously Hitman's freelancer mode, stuff like that, and so they're once again, they have shown in the past where we'll put a multiplayer mode in that's kind of like this or like that game, and then it will fail because they lose interest. This seems like a much better idea in that it keeps it single player focused, but has a score system, has a way of making it like compelling to sort of come back to, and changes the dynamic. I think Leon's the perfect person for that in that game, because obviously his style of gameplay suits the more high octane stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, more proof I think that Capcom starts to understand where to go with like additional stuff for these Resident Evil games, where either it's got to be little story nuggets or modes that are just like fun and don't require you to other people to be able to play with you, and which usually finds the cases they're gone before you've really gone through the story. That player base has died off because they've moved on. So yes, that's great to hear that it is like that. It does kind of build on what Mercenaries did to a degree, I suppose, and gives it that more sort of roguelike feel. And I know people say they're kind of bored of games adding roguelike modes or roguelike modes in general, but I don't know. It's just something really like delightful about getting that sort of one more go, one more bit, one more thing. Just I could unlock this thing if I just go for another run of this, and as we'll go on when we talk about other games in a bit. But yeah, it is. I'll definitely have to check this out now. Like, yeah, if it had been the mode I thought it would be, like I wasn't that bothered. It's like, oh, I don't really need extra hard mode. It's like I'm not
Right.
that interested. And it's like, but yeah, no, a roguelike style one, brilliant.
Yeah, and that's the only thing that I can say about it that maybe like I wish was a little bit more Mercenaries-esque, is that like with Mercenaries, the maps are smaller essentially. So like the running around and being afraid of running out of time is not really a huge concern because of the size of the maps, and it's pretty easy to run into a new mob that'll boost your score. The only thing
Yeah.
here is that and it should go without saying, like I couldn't imagine anybody doing this without having finished the campaign, but like knowing a lot of those maps back to front really does help. And I think that they've highlighted certain sections of certain maps that it makes the most sense, because some of them are like truncated sections. However, basically you do need the reminder that you need to keep moving forwards to find the next door, instead of just like thinking you're going to progress to the next area or whatnot. But it wasn't a huge issue. And yeah, it's not something that I think I'm going to spend more than, I would say, a handful of hours with at most, which some people might view as a negative because, Mercenaries, you could spend tens of hours playing that if you so chose. But with something like this, it's pretty fun, 5-hour distraction, I think, before I'm ready for some more, either a replay of New Game Plus or the next bit of story DLC that's out there. So yeah, it's a fun deviation from what I was expecting. So I'm appreciative of that.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
So should we take a little break before we go to our next game?
Yeah, let's take a quick break and we'll dive into what we've been playing for the rest of the week. But more on those games in a moment. And we're back from our break. And Neil, what else did you get around to playing this week?
Well, it's something that you've got to play in recent times as well that I've brought up before on the show, which is Ball X Pit, which I believe was by Kenny Sun, a Devolver Digital sort of game. And again, when we're talking about like roguelike type games, this is very much like that. I mean, if you don't know from when we talked about it before, it's a roguelike, it's a bullet hell game, and it's a town building sim as well, like all in one. But they all sort of have their own. I mean, the best way people sort of described it being like a roguelike block breaker sort of game. I'm constantly impressed by how many things people make into roguelikes, and it works at this point. Like, I think this last sort of 6-7 months alone, there's this, like I said, it's Breakout Arkanoid, but a roguelike, and it's amazing. And then you have stuff like Beyond Words, which is like Scrabble, but it's a roguelike, and that's ridiculously compelling as well. Like, amazing stuff. And I think these days it's having something to play that's just like, I could do this for half an hour, like that, knowing that I could sort of chip away at what I'm doing and get this extra little bit done. And this has been a game that's been just eating up my time. I've put about 50 hours into it now, like getting close to getting all the trophies and unlocking all the base game stuff. And then of course they added like another update, which is about the time you got into it, I believe, as well, wasn't it? So yeah, it's been, I hate that I sort of got to it like after we'd done like game of the year stuff last year, but because it did come out like at the back end, I think, of last year, and I just didn't get round to it. Because it was in the October sort of period that it originally came out. But yeah, like it's ended up being like a prevalent game for me this year, like, and one that I just love coming back to. And while it's not exactly the same at all, I think just the art style and like the nature of it reminds me of like the Rogue Legacy games. and they're some of my favorite roguelike style games anyway. Music's fucking phenomenal as well. I think we've had this discussion the last time. Yeah, but I've been enjoying it. I love the new things they keep adding to it. I love the math of trying to figure out when to combine things and make them into super weapons. I mean, most runs now are like a cakewalk. Like, just like the challenge is like using certain characters because they're like harder to use together. And obviously you can like, as you unlock certain things, you get to use two characters at once and like complement their abilities. But like the prevailing like ability will like take over the two of them, and so like if it's one of them that chooses their own abilities every time you get an upgrade rather than you do it, they'll do it. If one of them plays the game for itself, there is a character that does that, like that's they will be the one that takes the lead, and like there'll be enhancements caused by the secondary character. But yeah, I mean, I said loads about it so far, but you are obviously fresher to this, and how did you sort of feel when you came into this one?
Yeah, much like you, I was bummed that I didn't get around to this until, after our Game of the Year coverage. And I think for me, uh, this was a game that I even further put off playing because I just picked up Monsters Are Coming, Rock and Road, which is, I think, it's a similar type of, while the gameplay is very different, it's a similar kind of like progression in terms of like a roguelite where, you're running through similar challenges and then it scales appropriately, but ultimately you are upgrading like your base and your ability to build certain buildings, which is clearly the case with Ball X Pit as well. And I think that for me, like I had messaged you about it when I started playing this a few weeks ago, where like there was a 1 hour free trial on Xbox, and within the 45th minute I kind of like stopped playing the trial and immediately bought it because I was just like, yeah, this is going to be one of those games that I come back to and play in between everything else that I'm playing. Whether it's for 15 minutes at a time, whether it's for an hour and a half at a time, like it really is one of those games that is very simplistic seeming and like mechanically speaking. But then again, like it comes back to the metagame aspect of it, not only your base, but more importantly, the ways in which you familiarize yourself with the types of, special balls at your disposal, and the ways in which, you start to upgrade things, but then you start to get a better grasp on like how you can blend multiple special balls together to create something new that fundamentally like frees up a slot, but also further gives you an ability that is a combination of the two. And so the early hours for me were just like playing around with that, kind of like getting a grasp on how I could make myself as powerful as possible very quickly. But then it was more important to me at the same time to like experiment with fusing with the fusion system and whatnot, which was a lot of fun and still is a lot of fun. I've kind of fallen off a little bit, but it is something that, this game just got a new content update fairly recently. So it was like immediately, it's like, yeah, I went back to the top of my list for things I have to get back into because I was playing some of the DLC for Monsters Are Coming, which is a game I just referenced, which also had its first little thing of DLC, but it seems like Ball X Pit's DLC is a lot more substantial than what was introduced with Monsters Are Coming. But yeah, just from the outset, just a super addictive arcade style feel, but having a layer of strategy that stops it from feeling just like a quarter eater kind of arcade game, if you know what I mean. But yeah, super fun. I love the different characters that each time one of them is introduced, like it fundamentally makes me rethink my starting strategy with each one of them, which is just great. And influences like the types of upgrades that I want to start building at my base. So yeah, again, a game feels criminal how late it took for me to get to this one, but happy to all the same, especially with like clearly it being supported with new DLC and whatnot.
Like I said, I'm kind of like hanging on as long as I can, knowing that the last few trophies are there to get and exactly what I mean. It's rare these days that I have the energy to just bother to be looking into games and like, what do I have to do to get this trophy or that trophy or complete this? Like, I'll play a game until I get bored, but then certain games come out and like, Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like I could. You just reach that sort of threshold where you're like, I want to do everything in this game because it just feels like that would be fun to do, sort of thing. And yeah, I don't know. It's just that loop. I think that the music, the style of game it is, just like I mean, I ever since like Shenmue, like I do like with pachinko and like things like that. uh, Games like that where you just sort of like bounce balls off things and hit things like that, it works. Like I mean, it's like some of those basic old as video games are sort of thing. Like into like Pong. Like just
Hmm.
hitting a ball against a wall and like it all works to this day if you change the basic idea of it. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be many more sort of roguelikes made out of weird things. But yeah, I'm really loving the particular flavors we've had in recent years, and certainly in the last year or so. And as an aside, it's not a horror game, but I should recommend Beyond Words as being a Scrabble roguelike that just is great fun and kind of keeps your brain ticking in terms of thinking of words and like how words fit together. And the added bonus is it's made by the former Time Splitters folks. So obviously the former Time Splitters and GoldenEye folks, like David Doak. So yeah, like which was a great surprise. Like it's a fiendishly compelling. Despite it looking very deceptively like cutesy and mobile-esque on its surface. Yeah, as an aside, that's a great one. But beyond that, you had one more thing for us this week. That's probably a bit more horror than we've sort of got into so far.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's in the polar opposite in terms of its horror, but I suppose it's in the opposite in terms of like the amount of longevity you'll get out of it because this was just a play test that you can basically just get on Steam. All you have to do is request access and then it's automatic. But this would be the play test for Perceptum from developer Duck Reaction. Now, I'll say like if you take a look at this game, it kind of looks like just another super pristinely Unreal 5 looking haunted house game. However, I think that in this very brief playtest, it does a really great job of showing how it could potentially be differentiating itself from a lot of the more traditional haunted house type of a game. So in Perceptum, the player plays as a medium who's investigating the disappearance of a family in a house, basically. And so there's only 2 or maybe 3 very brief environments. Took me less than 10 minutes to play through this. However, the thing that it does really well up front is like establishing what is the main mechanic of this game, which is that you basically have a pocket watch. When you open up the watch, one part of it is like the actual watch, but then on the top part is a mirror on it. And so you utilize that mirror to not only look behind you, but more importantly, it allows the player to perceive things or to focus on things in an environment that they can't see from the naked eye. So in one section, you basically are in this room and you have to go through it and you have to look at the crosses that are in the room through the mirror. And then that kind of like triggers them as almost like pressure points for a puzzle, and then the crosses flip upside down. Once you do those 3 things, it allows you to progress to the next room. And so, like, again, graphically speaking, this game is gorgeous. But what I think really allows the merger of this game to not only look gorgeous, but to also be generally terrifying in the span of less than 10 minutes. And it is the type of thing, we pretty much pride ourselves on very rarely talking about horror games in the notion of like what's scary and what's not. But like here, I think that the approach to scares works so well because of the fact they feel like that they have been curated and directed by someone that understands the best aspects of horror. It's a lot less about what you see and what you hear. And in 1 or 2 instances of what you see in this game, it has the added benefit of like, it's something that's behind you. So you feel very vulnerable in that regard, but also it's just like the very restrained nature of not having the traditional sort of like jump scare approach. Every time you take out that mirror, like you're afraid that something's going to be, directly with its like face in the reflection, but that doesn't happen because of the fact that, again, this is clearly from developers and creatives that understand the best approach to horror. However, there's like one or two very brief jump scares in this game, in this playtest of Perceptum, that is just like so well done and legitimately creepy when I played this with, headphones and the lights off. And I don't know. I think that I'm really interested to see if they're able to maintain that sort of like level of unnerving, but also the vulnerability of having a tool at your disposal that shows you, the else world. However, it's always something that's behind you.
Yeah.
And so like that aspect of it, I think worked really, really well for me. Again, it's a very brief sort of a slice of this experience, but I'm very keen to see like how they're able to expand on this, because I think also like the puzzle aspect of that reflection mechanic, we'll see like if that's able to evolve, or if it's able to kind of like have some interesting modifiers to the very kind of like approachable thing of like, yeah, you look at something in this reflection and it changes the environment in some way. It'll be interesting to see how they expand on that. And yeah, I have a feeling this will be a game that will benefit from being shorter rather than longer, but I have
Yeah, I
no
think they
issue
said
with
it's
that.
about I think they said it's about going to be about 3 hours, I think, for the main game. And if
That's
how
perfect.
how long was the playtest?
I would say it would take you about less than 10 minutes, if that.
All right. So yeah, so it's a small slice of a small game. So yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, 3 hours then. I think you could probably just about maintain things. I think given what we've played in the past, and shorter games can do that quite well. Yeah, yeah, because then you don't really have to push the idea too hard, and you don't have to
Mhm.
change too much. You can sort of play around with the tool set you've got, and maybe throw in the odd little surprise here and there. But you don't have to, start making an entire different mode of playing, I suppose. And yeah, that's. But still, yeah, it would be interesting to see how this sort of turns into a full fat thing. I mean, funny looking at the developer, the previous games not being horror based as well,
Mm.
like they've sort of gone different styles and genres and things. So yeah, it looks promising like that, and I think any game using Unreal Engine 5 kind of does have a promising look to it. I suppose it's about the how well optimized it ends up being, I guess, but still, yeah, I think the early sort of signs of it look pretty good.
Yeah, and one of their previous games being a puzzle game gives me a lot of confidence in their ability to like actually present puzzles that are a bit more than just that example I gave was very basic, but
Yes.
it's a nice primer for teaching players the fundamentals of what that puzzle mechanic could look like. And on top of that, there's also an aspect that's introduced that isn't really explored all that much, but like closing your eyes
Yeah.
will allow you to interact or see things in an environment in a way that you can't with your eyes open. And so I'm really interested to see how they can expand upon that with, perceptions of reality and perceptions of environment through that. So yeah, I think, it being 3 hours long is rumored to be is like a really great primer for an experience that I could see very quickly outstaying its welcome. However, again, speaking to the direction of it and whatnot that was displayed in the playtest, on top of it being 3 hours instead of whatever, like the 10 hours that something like Visage was, that's more of like a horror cinema approach that I think I'm
Yeah.
very much more in favor of than some of the horror odysseys that we've played over the last few years of the haunted house fare.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it got a good thing. Actually, as a little aside, as we are sort of at the end of this anyway, and got to bring up is like, I was very sad to hear about obviously the cancellation of the Paranormal Activity game that,
Yeah.
and how that sort of, because obviously we had him on at the show, and
Mm.
it's, and he's so enthusiastic about it, and yeah, it's a shame that it had to happen that way. Obviously, just they couldn't give him more time to make the
Yeah.
game that he wanted to make, and he wasn't happy with making a game that wasn't, you know, perfectly done and
Mm.
finished. Yeah,
Right.
but yeah, that's the right move to make,
Yeah.
absolutely. And yeah, it's like it must be so frustrating when you've spent so much time and effort to sort of get something out there, and I guess we'll never know. Now, it's the worst part about it. But
Yeah.
hopefully, you can go on to make something, that using its, experience with all this, and bounce back nicely, and we'll see in future what he gets to do.
Yeah, I mean that the notion of like a bad game is forever, right? Delay is temporary, bad game is forever kind of a thing. Like it's the type of thing where like we were such a fan of Brian's work, previously to that, and obviously getting to chat with him was great, but at the same time, and this is total speculation on my part, so I don't know anything about this that hasn't been published in reporting and whatnot, but just like the very notion that you contract a developer that has made a fantastic game and you trust them with your IP, and then they come back and they say like, hey, I don't think that this is quite ready. Like the notion that you're not going to just like abide by that developers or that creatives, like, in the fact that it's like, yeah, it can't be easy to ask for extra time, right? That's got to be an incredibly agonizing, difficult decision. However,
Yeah.
if an established creative that has created one of the most popular games of the 2020s comes to you and says like, I need more time to cook, the notion that you don't immediately offer that or extend that is just beyond me. So, unfortunately it comes across kind of as like, again, people that wanted to get into, people being, people at Paramount wanting to get into games and yet not really fundamentally understanding perhaps the medium itself, and how, requesting additional time or delays are like pretty commonplace in games these days. So the notion that like, again, if you familiarized yourself with Brian's game and, games for that matter, and just like his, pedigree within the medium, the notion that you wouldn't just honor that is pretty bewildering. But again, we've seen equally poor and in some instances worse business decisions being made in the realm of games recently. So it's just like you said, it's a huge shame.
Yeah, I think, given the sort of two-way street we've had with horror movie to game adaptations and vice versa, like it was promising that we'd get something like that, and to see how Brian would make a game around Paranormal Activity. I mean, obviously he's producing that Creepshow game as well, so, which should be great to see as well. So it's not all doom and gloom there, but yeah, it would have been nice to have another sort of certainly on that sort of level, an indie developer, really just getting to experiment with something like that, like a big name. Because we've had that the other way around, with the movie adaptations, it's a shame that we didn't get that. But like I said, hopefully Creepshow does give them sort of something to sort of focus on in the meantime.
It's a short and sweet episode this week, but I'm sure we're going to have more to chat about next week. But, even if our lists are a little shorter than usual, we kind of like covered the gambit of horror experiences and some revisiting things that we didn't make much time for in the past. And at the same time, tackling some things that were a bit more new. But as I had said in the intro, everyone be sure tune back in this Thursday for the latest bi-weekly edition of Horror Bites, our indie horror showcase, in which we're going to kick off our new space theme, in which Neil and I both have picked a original indie title that tackles that subgenre, utilizing two very distinctly different approaches to gameplay. But until then, my friend, as always, it's a pleasure chatting horror with you for Safe Room.
My man, until next time.
Thank you for listening to this week's main feed episode of Safe Room. If you've enjoyed our horrifying discussions, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your preferred podcast platform, as this helps us immensely in ensuring that the show continues to grow. For any and all show updates and additional content, you can follow Safe Room on all of our socials, which are linked in the episode notes, at SafeRoomPod. And finally, you can send any and all emails to saferoompod@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.